Have you ever felt like your efforts to learn something new are just not paying off? No matter how hard you try, progress seems slow. Well, what if I told you there's a simple, effective way to make learning easier and faster? And the best part, it's all about breaking down complex ideas into something fun and easy to understand. Welcome to my YouTube channel Learn English 24/7. Learning English can often feel like a never-ending task. For many, it's a challenge that seems to take forever, no matter how much time and effort they put into it. The endless memorization of vocabulary, the endless rules of grammar, the overwhelming number of tenses, it can all be so confusing. Yet, there's one method that could make your English learning journey not just easier, but also more enjoyable: learning through stories. Stories have been an integral part of human culture for centuries. They are how we connect, how we understand the world, and how we make sense of our experiences. But when it comes to language learning, stories hold a special kind of magic. Why? Because they make learning feel natural, interesting, and even fun. Stories are not just words on a page, they are the living, breathing context in which language comes to life. And that's exactly why learning English through stories is so effective. Imagine for a moment, instead of sitting down with a boring grammar book, staring at lists of rules that you're supposed to memorize, you're reading a story. A compelling narrative, filled with characters, emotions, and real-life situations. As you read, you don't just encounter words in isolation, you see how they fit into the bigger picture of real conversation. You see how phrases are used in context. You understand their meaning, their tone, and their purpose. It's like learning English the way native speakers actually use it. When you read stories, you aren't just memorizing vocabulary words or struggling with grammar. You're learning how to use the language in a way that feels natural and intuitive. You understand not just what words mean, but how to use them to communicate effectively. It's like learning to speak English through real conversations, without the pressure or the stress of trying to get everything perfect from the very beginning. In this video, we'll take a closer look at how learning through stories can help you improve your English. We'll talk about why this method works, how it can boost your vocabulary, improve your grammar, and increase your confidence. And, most importantly, we'll show you how you can start using stories to improve your English from today. One of the best ways to start learning through stories is by using graded readers. These are books that are specifically designed for learners of English, with vocabulary and sentence structures that are just right for your level. They take you step by step, guiding you through stories that are engaging and educational. And as you read, you'll not only improve your understanding of English, but you'll also start speaking with more confidence. Gradually, you'll feel like the words are flowing naturally, without the constant struggle to remember vocabulary or rules. But what makes stories so powerful? It's the context. Stories are not just isolated facts or random vocabulary, they are full of situations, emotions, and characters that give meaning to the words. You see how language works in the real world, in real conversations. Whether it's a character asking for directions, describing a feeling, or telling a story, you're learning the real language, not just textbook versions. This method helps you internalize the language, making it easier to remember and use in your own conversations. Another huge benefit of learning through stories is that it helps you build your vocabulary naturally. Instead of memorizing a long list of words that may or may not come up in conversation, you learn words that are directly related to the story. You encounter new vocabulary in context, making it much easier to understand and remember. For example, if you read a story about someone going on a trip, you'll learn words related to travel, like passport, luggage, and hotel. But the best part is that you'll understand how to use those words in a sentence, because you've seen them used in the story. This kind of learning sticks much better than memorization alone. In addition to vocabulary, stories also help improve your grammar. The beauty of reading stories is that you get to see grammar in action. Instead of memorizing a rule like, "this is the past tense," you actually see the past tense being used in sentences. You see how sentences are formed and how different tenses fit together to create a clear and cohesive narrative. As you read, you'll naturally pick up the grammar patterns that are essential for speaking and writing in English. It's like practicing grammar without even realizing it. Perhaps one of the most valuable benefits of learning through stories is the confidence boost it gives you. When you read stories and understand the language, it empowers you to use English in real life. You'll start feeling more comfortable with the language, knowing that you've seen how words and phrases are used in context. The more you read, the more you'll start recognizing patterns, making it easier to speak and understand English when it matters most. By the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of how learning English through stories can help you improve your vocabulary, grammar, and speaking skills. You'll feel ready to dive into the world of stories and start using them to enhance your English learning experience. So, get ready to embark on a fun and rewarding journey that will take your English skills to the next level. Learning English can sometimes feel like an overwhelming challenge. Many learners find themselves stuck at a certain point, unable to break through to fluency. You might have spent hours learning vocabulary, memorizing grammar rules, and even watching English movies, but when it's time to speak, you freeze. Frustrating, right? You know exactly what you want to say, but the words just don't seem to come out the way you imagined. It's easy to feel like you're not getting anywhere, despite all your hard work. Maybe you struggle with grammar and get tangled up in the rules. Or maybe you've learned tons of words, but when you need them, they're just not there. It's totally normal to feel stuck in this cycle. It's like you're doing everything right, but something still feels off. And then there's the issue of confidence. You might be scared of making mistakes or sounding wrong. This is a fear that a lot of language learners share. You might hold back from speaking because you're not sure if your English is good enough or worry people won't understand you. This fear can really hold you back and stop you from practicing. But here's the good news, you're not alone. There is a solution, and it's found in the power of stories. Once you start learning English through stories, everything changes. You stop seeing English as a series of rules and memorized words, and instead, you begin to understand how the language works in real-life situations. You start to see the bigger picture and notice how words and phrases fit into context. That's when the magic happens. By embracing stories, you'll gradually become more comfortable and confident speaking English. Stories help you understand not just the words, but the rhythm and flow of the language, making it easier to recall and use what you've learned in natural conversations. Let me tell you the story of Ali, a young man I had the privilege of working with not long ago. Ali had been studying English for about 2 years. He had a good grasp of grammar, could understand movies and TV shows without too much trouble, and he could even read English books with ease. But there was one big challenge he couldn't seem to overcome: speaking. When it came time to speak, he would freeze. His mind would go blank, and no matter how much he practiced alone or with a tutor, he couldn't seem to say anything smoothly. Ali's struggle was one that many learners can relate to. He could read English, listen to it, and understand it, but speaking just felt like a completely different skill. He often felt frustrated, especially when he'd try to speak with friends who were native speakers. It wasn't that Ali didn't know the words, he did. It was just that when he needed them most, they didn't come out the way he wanted. His sentences were jumbled, his vocabulary was limited, and he would find himself constantly searching for the right words. Worst of all, he felt embarrassed. He didn't want to make mistakes, and that fear of speaking imperfectly held him back from trying. One day, after yet another frustrating conversation with a native speaker, Ali came to me for advice. He was discouraged and wasn't sure how to break through this barrier. I could see that he was stuck, but I also knew he was on the verge of a breakthrough. That's when I suggested something that seemed simple but turned out to be life-changing: reading stories. Not textbooks or grammar exercises, but real stories, stories that were written specifically for learners like him. At first, Ali was skeptical. He had tried reading before, but he didn't see how it could help with his speaking. He worried it might be too simple or not really make a difference. But I reassured him that the key was to read stories that were in context, stories where he could see how the language worked in real-life situations. These stories, I explained, were filled with phrases, expressions, and vocabulary that native speakers actually use in conversations. They weren't just isolated words on a list, they were part of a living, breathing dialogue. Ali agreed to give it a try. I suggested he start with a graded reader, a book specifically designed for learners of English, with sentences and vocabulary that were appropriate for his level. He was hesitant at first, but he promised he would give it a shot. His goal was simple: read for just 10 minutes every day. Nothing too hard, just a short, manageable commitment. In the beginning, Ali didn't see dramatic changes right away. He would read for 10 minutes, then go about his day. But after a few days, something interesting happened. He started noticing phrases from the stories coming back to him in his conversations. When he was talking to his friends, he would find himself using the same words and expressions he had read in the stories. At first, he felt surprised by this. How could he remember all of these words just by reading? But the more he read, the more natural it felt. The stories weren't just teaching him new vocabulary, they were teaching him how to use the language in real, everyday situations. A week into his daily reading routine, Ali began to feel a change. He was no longer worrying about making mistakes when he spoke. The pressure he had always felt to be perfect was starting to lift. He wasn't thinking so much about the grammar or the exact pronunciation, he was just speaking. He had seen how the characters in the stories spoke, how they used simple phrases and made mistakes too, and that made him feel more confident. His fear of speaking wasn't gone completely, but it was starting to shrink. The stories had shown him that it was okay to make mistakes. In fact, it was a part of learning. Over the next few weeks, Ali kept reading, and he started noticing even more changes. His vocabulary was growing, and his sentences were becoming more fluid. He didn't have to pause as often to find the right word. And, more importantly, he started speaking English more often, not just reading and listening. Whether he was talking to his classmates or chatting with his family, the words seemed to come out more easily. He wasn't perfect yet, but he was definitely improving. The more he read, the more natural his speech became. One of the most significant moments for Ali came when he participated in a conversation with a group of native speakers at a social event. In the past, he would have felt self-conscious and avoided speaking at all costs. But this time, he joined the conversation with confidence. He shared his thoughts, asked questions, and responded to what others were saying without hesitation. He even used a few phrases he had picked up from the stories, and it felt completely natural. He was no longer focused on his mistakes or worried about what others might think. He was enjoying the conversation. By the time Ali finished his first graded reader, something remarkable had happened. He had gone from being a student who feared speaking to someone who was engaging in conversations every day without worrying about perfection. Reading stories had allowed him to internalize the language, to learn how it felt to speak naturally. It had given him the confidence to stop fearing mistakes and start communicating freely. Ali's story is proof of the power of learning through stories. What he experienced is something many learners go through: the frustration of feeling stuck, the fear of speaking, and the struggle to use vocabulary and grammar correctly. But by shifting his focus to reading stories, Ali found a way to break through that barrier. He learned English in context, and as a result, his speaking skills improved naturally. The key was that he didn't just memorize vocabulary or rules, he learned to use the language in a way that felt effortless and real. If you're struggling with speaking English, Ali's story is a reminder that you're not alone. And the good news is that you don't have to do it the hard way. Reading stories, especially graded readers designed for learners, is one of the most effective and enjoyable ways to improve your speaking. It's a method that allows you to learn in a relaxed, pressure-free environment, where the language is always used in context, and the grammar and vocabulary are integrated into the flow of conversation. Through stories, you'll build confidence, improve your vocabulary, and start speaking English like you've always wanted to. So, if you're feeling stuck, take a page from Ali's book. Start reading stories every day, and see how they can help you overcome your fears and improve your English in a way that feels natural and fun. So, how can you start improving your English with stories? The good news is that it doesn't have to be complicated or overwhelming. Here are a few simple, actionable steps you can take right now to make the most out of learning English through stories. One of the best ways to get started with learning through stories is to use graded readers. These books are designed specifically for learners of English, and they come in different levels. Whether you're a beginner or an advanced learner, there's a graded reader that fits your level. Graded readers are often adapted versions of popular stories, written in simple, clear language that is easy to understand. They introduce new vocabulary and grammar gradually, so you're not overwhelmed with complex sentences or difficult words. As you progress through different levels, you'll notice your language skills improving step by step. Choosing the right level is important. If a book is too difficult, you might get frustrated and give up, but if it's too easy, you won't be challenged enough to improve. Start with a book that feels just a little bit above your comfort zone. This will help you learn new things without feeling lost or bored. Reading aloud is a powerful way to improve both your pronunciation and your speaking skills. When you read aloud, you're not only practicing pronunciation, but you're also training your ear to recognize how the words sound. You'll become more comfortable hearing English in your own voice. In addition, reading aloud helps you focus on the flow of the language. You'll get a better sense of sentence rhythm, punctuation, and intonation. It's like training your mouth to speak English correctly without the pressure of a real conversation. If you're worried about making mistakes, don't be. The key is to practice without stress. No one is listening, so it's the perfect opportunity to make mistakes, try different intonations, and practice new sounds. It's also helpful to record yourself while reading. This way, you can listen to your pronunciation and identify areas where you need to improve. One of the most powerful aspects of learning through stories is how you can pick up vocabulary and context. Instead of memorizing lists of words, reading stories lets you see how words and phrases are used naturally in sentences. This method helps you understand not just the meaning of the word, but also how it fits into everyday conversation. For example, imagine you come across the word, quickly, in the sentence, "She ran quickly to catch the bus." Instead of just memorizing the word, quickly, you'll learn it in the context of the sentence, which helps you remember it better. You'll also understand how the word is used in real life. As you read, pay attention to how different words and phrases are used. If you come across a new word, don't just skip it. Look at the surrounding words to figure out the meaning. And, if needed, use a dictionary to understand it fully. But always try to learn vocabulary as part of a sentence rather than in isolation. This will make it easier to remember and use correctly in conversations later. A huge barrier that holds many learners back from speaking English confidently is the fear of making mistakes. When you're reading stories, it's easy to fall into the trap of perfectionism. You want to understand everything perfectly, pronounce every word correctly, and never make any errors. But the truth is, mistakes are a natural part of the learning process. In fact, making mistakes is a great way to learn. Each mistake you make is an opportunity to grow and improve. When you're reading stories, don't be afraid to stumble over words, mispronounce something, or misinterpret a sentence. Instead, focus on enjoying the process. Reading should be fun, not stressful. When you read stories, you're building the foundation of your English skills, and mistakes are just part of the journey. Over time, the more you read, the fewer mistakes you'll make. As you continue to practice, you'll get more comfortable with using the language in conversation without worrying about being perfect. One of the most important things you can do to improve your English is to practice consistently. It's better to read for 10 to 15 minutes every day than to read for hours once a week. Short, daily practice sessions are much more effective for language learning because they help keep the language fresh in your mind. You don't need to set aside a lot of time to read, just a few minutes a day will add up. If you're busy, even reading 1 or 2 pages of a story every day can make a big difference. The key is consistency. When you make reading part of your daily routine, your language skills will improve faster and more naturally. Plus, the more you read, the more you'll begin to understand how English works, and soon, speaking will become easier, too. As you practice, don't be afraid to switch up the types of stories you read. You can start with simpler stories and gradually challenge yourself with more complex ones. Over time, you'll see your vocabulary grow, your grammar improve, and your confidence increase. To make your language practice even more effective, try to engage with the story in different ways. For example, after reading a chapter, summarize it out loud or write a brief summary in English. This will help reinforce the vocabulary and grammar you've just learned and improve your speaking skills at the same time. You can also discuss the story with someone else. Whether it's a friend, a language exchange partner, or even a tutor, talking about the story will help you practice speaking and learn to express your thoughts in English. Some learners like to visualize the story as they read. Imagine the characters and the setting in your mind. This will help you immerse yourself in the language and make the learning experience feel more real and engaging. By following these simple steps, you'll soon discover how much fun and effective learning English through stories can be. Whether you're a beginner or an advanced learner, stories offer a natural, enjoyable way to build your language skills. They help you expand your vocabulary, improve your grammar, and become more confident in speaking, all without the stress of traditional language learning methods. Remember, consistency is key. The more you practice, the better you'll get. So, start today. Choose a graded reader, read for just 10 to 15 minutes a day, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. By incorporating stories into your learning routine, you'll find that improving your English becomes easier, more enjoyable, and something you'll look forward to every day. Happy learning! Now it's your turn. Take the first step towards improving your English today. Choose a graded reader that matches your current level and start reading. Don't worry if you only have a few minutes, just begin with 10 to 15 minutes a day. Consistency is key, so make it part of your daily routine, and you'll start to see results before you know it. Remember, the goal isn't to rush, but to enjoy the process. As you read more stories, your vocabulary, grammar, and speaking confidence will naturally improve. Don't stress about perfection, just focus on enjoying the learning journey. And if you want to continue improving your English, make sure to subscribe for more helpful tips and tricks. Let us know in the comments which story you're going to start with, and don't hesitate to share your progress with us. We'd love to hear about your journey, and together, we can keep learning and growing. To sum it up, learning English through stories is not only effective but also enjoyable. By choosing graded readers, reading aloud, and learning vocabulary in context, you'll naturally improve your speaking, listening, and overall English skills. The key is to make reading a daily habit and to embrace the process without worrying about making mistakes. Thank you for watching and subscribing to my YouTube channel, and remember, every story you read is a step forward in your language journey. Keep practicing, keep reading, and most importantly, keep enjoying the experience of learning. See you in the next video.